Hey, Ange, how you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I had some great feedback. I'm curious of the feedback that you got. I had a lot of people reaching out saying, "Wow, I connected with your cousin and her witty charm and her her comedian side." Because people know I am not the funny one. I'm more serious, and if you need me in a dark alley, I'm your person. I will beat
You're the
anybody's
person
ass
I
for anybody.
want.
Yeah, I'll be in your corner, and that's what people usually come and get me. They're like, "Oh, I got a fight to pick. Let me go get Kendra." So what was the feedback you got?
Well, like mostly I kind of reached out to some of our cousins, the ones we're close with, and friends from high school and people I grew up with. And it's all been just really overwhelmingly supportive and positive and kind of validating in a way that I wasn't expecting. And I'm just I'm just so blown away and humbled by it. And I think one of the major themes that I kept hearing, kind of the common consensus among our listeners is that I should probably consider speaking directly into the microphone. And so ask and you shall receive, people. I am happy to take that as a note. Like growth, happens at different rates for all of us. But I will
What,
take
what's
that feedback, and I just take that to mean people are interested in what I have to say and what you have to say. And so on that note, this is Kendra and Angela with episode 2 of Country
episode two?
Crocked. And we're here bringing you the silky smooth sounds of a couple Midwestern accents and some light trauma dumping 15 minutes on the hour. So
Yes,
Kendra,
I
checking
can't
in
believe
with
it's
you.
not better.
Can't believe it.
Come on in and grab a seat. There's no better place to be. Two Midwestern Gen Xers emotionally stunted. Subtlety was not part of our upbringing. So here we are in all of our glory, country crocked. I can't believe it's not better.
No, I was great. It was great to hear feedback. I didn't hear anything negative. So before we get started, to this podcast is, has to do with childhood trauma. This is not for young ears. And if you're triggered by things, be prepared with the conversations that we have. I always like to, both of us like to warn our audience of the context in which we'll be speaking about. So, I'm going to kick us off today.
All right, let's get into it.
You know, um, what do you feel counts as sexual abuse?
Okay, like that's kind of a hard question to answer,
It's a
right?
hard one. Yeah, I'm diving in. I'm like, you
Well,
know what? Let's open up the floodgates here.
you feel like it should be cut and dry, right? Like onlookers and other adults and outsiders, they should have a clear checklist. Like here's the shit I'm seeing. Like, well, I'm not seeing this. I'm not seeing this. So like it's not time to intervene yet. And honestly, I think that's what made it so tricky for the people who did have concerns about us growing up, because like it's not clear where that line is. But I think as far as victims are concerned, like we have agency over our bodies and our feelings and how we process and internalize and kind of disseminate our emotions, if you will. Like we process them ourselves, but then other people are the recipients of those emotions. So we're kind of agents over that. And it's difficult because like really it's a boundaries conversation, right? And like our boundaries kind of change as we get older. They can loosen up, they can relax, they can tighten up. And um like we just have to be mature enough to realize that our boundaries and our comfort levels and what we're willing to engage in kind of ebb and flow. And that's one part of it. That's the hardest part of it, is figuring out that for yourself. Like where is your line in the sand? What is appropriate and what's not appropriate? But like your work isn't done at that point because well, that's just the beginning. Like there's got to be a handoff. Like what do you do with this information? Like what do you do with that knowledge? And so like the onus is on us at that point to kind of communicate those boundaries, communicate our comfort level. And
Mhm.
like if we expect everyone to operate within our safety rails, like the ones we impose on ourselves, like they have to know what those safety rails are. And I think a lot of victims, I've struggled with it a lot, is just expecting people to know what to do or what to say or define those boundaries for you, and nobody else can do that.
Yeah,
Although,
and I'm going to interject real quick.
yeah, go ahead.
The question is to you right now as an adult, and that's how you answered it, and that's kind of what I've expected. Not those exact words, but I expected how you responded. But I want people to, when I ask that question, and I'm asking a 40-something-year-old now what they define as sexual abuse, you can give a definition. You're talking about boundaries. You're talking about what feels safe, what doesn't feel safe for you. Now imagine our, our little minds. We don't know what sexual boundaries are. We're being taught. And that's where the reason why I had that question, because, I was asked that question. I did try counseling. I know that you have gone to counseling and it has done wonders for you. I usually end up counseling the counselor. So it's not a,
You ever
it's not a
make them
win.
cry? Like it's always
I did make
off-putting when my
one.
counselor cries.
I made one cry, but probably not for the same reasons. You were probably being like, you're reaching a milestone and I'm just like, listen, I'm paying you. Why am I the one helping you? And I don't mind helping people, but I need to know my role before it starts. But anyhow, that was something that they asked me, is what did I think, sexual abuse was? And I'm thinking to myself, you're asking me this, but I wasn't sexually abused as an adult. I mean, maybe I was at certain things, but like the original crime was done to a child. How do I know what sexual abuse is? That's a child cannot answer that. Inner child, cannot answer that because it's too late. I see the signs now as an adult what sexual abuse is. So I was trying to get to a point today, like where maybe for other people to look at those signs. Other, like our friends' parents that, got, like you said before, they were our safe place sometimes, or, different family members that were our safe place. They just didn't, not that they didn't notice, maybe they didn't notice, because I was holding anger towards people that I thought should just, as an adult automatically notice, because I notice those things. You notice those things, but why do we notice them? Because we experienced it. So, as I guess where I'm going to ask the next question is, what do you think? Not what do you think? What do you know now to tell, other people? So if they have a niece or nephew or a child, even their own children, if they're like at a sleepover, or if they're going to a church that you trust, because a lot of things happen in churches, and that it's what to look for. Like, don't close these signs down. For you personally, what has always pissed me off is the sign was a doctor physically telling an adult in your home, listen, your kid's being sexually abused, and you were a baby. So that was like obvious. That was an obvious marker, and still nothing was done. But what about the people outside of that circle that heard that story, that were told that story? What, come on. You as Angela now in your 40s, what do you have to say to these adults to look for? Like, so that they can be like, whoa, wait a minute, I need to stand up for Becky Sue or Linda Lou. I'm just making up some names here.
Well, I think you know Kendra's right. My pediatrician did inform my mother when I was in diapers that there were very evident signs of abuse. I don't know that that was shared at the time with other people. I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, Kendra, but I feel like that kind of came out years and years and years later after my parents got divorced. And
Yeah, I'm going to
was that
correct you.
known at the time?
It was known. My mom knew.
Oh, that's disappointing.
Yeah, so it was known because I remember growing up with the story. I always knew that story, and then when we got older, of course, that story was at the forefront
Mm-hmm.
when it all started coming out. Well, yeah, the pediatrician, and I'm just like mind blown by it because I think if you or I were told that about our children, let me tell you something. First of all, my husband never, ever, ever would touch my children, and is a wonderful, wonderful father. I mean, just amazing. Like,
Well, doesn't every wife think that about her husband, though? Can you
oh yeah,
understand
every
my
wife
mom's
thinks that.
reaction?
You know what? I do think every wife, but let me tell you, as much as I love my husband, even when my kids were little, if a pediatrician told you or I, and I think you would handle this the same way, not even given our past, just given the time period that we've grown up in knowing other stories of sexual abuse. I mean, sexual abuse, it's crazy how many people have been abused. I think, I don't want to say I think, I know, I would probably be in jail right now. I would go after him. I would kill him. Anybody that would
Okay.
harm my child in any way, I would hurt. Luckily, my husband doesn't. He's actually the favorite parent around here. Um, I
Isn't
mean,
that
I'm
funny how that
loved.
works?
Yeah, it's crazy. But, it's to be fun. It's funny because, usually the dads are the disciplinary or whatever. I am the disciplinary in the home, or not anymore. My kids are adults. But I always was. And Justin was the fun dad. He got the fun part. I mean, he would step up a lot, like when it got a little tough on me. But if I would have ever been told by my children's pediatrician that my husband had touched my children, I would be in jail right now and he'd be 6 feet in the ground.
Well, I think some of the things that we've talked about, Kendra, where we say, how could they not have known? Like, those are the things I notice in other kids. And let me share some of that with our listeners. Because obviously my mom wasn't going around broadcasting to everybody what the pediatrician told her.
Mm-mm.
Like that was going to be very private, a select few knowledge. But here's what I might have looked like to people looking in. I I'm going to speak about myself, and I can tell you what Kendra was like, but I was a very quiet child. I kept to myself. I was a voracious reader. I really think I used books to dissociate. I read I'm not exaggerating. I read thousands and thousands of books when I was a child.
She's not
Um,
lying.
I they're all in my head still, which is frustrating because my head's full of like, Nancy Drew books, but not this trauma that I want to remember. But, like Nancy Drew taught me some good stuff too. So let's not discount any of that. But, I was consuming all these books. I was not playing with other children. And I think that's what people should have keyed in on, was how unsocial I was, how other kids didn't want to play with me. And it's not because I was mean or anything. I actually got a lot of feedback, a lot of hurtful feedback when I was a kid about how weird I was. I've always used humor as a coping mechanism. And I kind of noticed
I
that.
love
And
your weirdness.
I love you too. Even when you don't get my jokes, like I still love
Yeah,
you.
and I don't a lot of times. You can ask her. I'll be like, that's where she is like my mom, where they laugh at some really weird. It's
Ernest is
awesome.
fucking funny, man. But when kids don't want to engage with other kids, you kind of look at that as an adult, and you don't intervene right away. You just observe. Like why is this one plucked off the herd? And you kind of look. And so I think, just driving kids away, and I still struggle with it. And this is probably the first time I'm saying it out loud, so forgive me as I stumble through it, but I feel like I was pushing other kids away. I feel like I was pushing boyfriends away. I feel like I was pushing people away, not on purpose, but with how earnest I was for that connection. I wanted so badly, just to have a best friend or a boyfriend or, and if anybody showed me a little bit of attention, like I would just latch on to it because like I wasn't getting that validation at home. I wasn't getting that warm, secure, safe love at home. And I sought it everywhere. And I think when that's coming from a little kid, like that earnest yearning for attention, like that should be a red flag for adults. And I don't know what your thoughts are on that. If you kind of saw the same thing.
I do. I agree with the whole, I call it self-sabotaging. So I really, if I did, I earned, I wanted the earnest love and the earnest friendships, and I longed for those. But then when I got them, and and I did this even into adult years, and this is part of a trauma response, is I would get close to people, and I would, you know, then they would want to know the real me. Like they would get too close to me, and I would almost, I'm not gonna say almost, I self-sabotaged relationships on purpose because I didn't want them, that's going to go into our next topic, minimization of what we went through, and we'll wait on that bit. And I felt if I got too close to people, they would see that in me somehow. I know it's weird, but they would see that in me. For me, if I'm telling an adult now, and I have, because, in one of my my jobs I do is I'm not gonna say where I work, but, I have to notice things. And what I would tell adults to look for is the kid, with you, it was quietness. I was the opposite, and we always, it's kind of, I think we're like the yin and the yang. That's why we were always so close growing up, is because you were quiet, I was loud, and you were more introverted, read books. I was outgoing, in a cornfield, drinking Bush Light, sometimes Mad Dog 2020. That was, we had very different lifestyles, but people should have looked at that. Why is Kendra, why doesn't she focus in class? Why are her grades failing? Why is she always in trouble, getting in fights, go ahead. You're going to interject something. I know you got a thought.
Yeah. Like my ADD is killing me. Well, it's interesting that you say that, and I don't want to upset you, but I think like this really illustrates our point about the abuse in the system that holds it. Because when you were going through those wild years, those lion years, that's the feedback I was getting at home, and I don't, my dad driving those conversations and, basically just trying to imprint on my mom, like, oh, that Kendra, she's a troublemaker. And I don't know if Angela should be hanging around her, Kendra lies all the, and that's what I heard as a child. Like, you can't believe anything Kendra says, she's a liar. She just let,
Oh
and
yeah, he was
like it's so
setting the
hurtful
stage.
for me to say it to you, like I don't want to say
No,
those things to you, but
no, he was setting a stage. He was protecting himself. If he could portray me as the liar, then if I did, I think he was afraid because of my strong personality. I was strong personality. You can ask, my mom and my other families and other cousins. Um, my personality, like, I would speak up. I'm surprised I didn't, but like I said before, I think it was out of protection of you and my mom. But I think he knew that. He knew my personality. He knew I was getting of an age where, she's going to crack. And he would at every turn, I've told you in the past, like, I never went to, um, I never went to family functions. And I've told you, I'm not going to family functions. And it was mainly to stay away from him. And if I did go to I did go to one. Like, I was probably early 20s, and my husband and I went out to something at our grandparents' house, and your dad was there, and my skin crawled when I pulled into the the driveway. I was just like, oh God, here's this car. They're back from visiting wherever I think they lived in Ohio at the time. And I just, he made an effort to corner me and to try to get on my good side per se. And that's the stuff that he did, so when he would call me, I heard him say that, he told my mom that too. He's like, that I lied. Okay. I'm trying to think how old I was. Oh, when it started, I was probably like, oh, I'm going to say 8 is as far back as I can remember. I have even it's my kids, they'll ask me because they remember their whole childhood. Like Justin can remember like when his mom was pregnant with him. I swear to God, it's so weird.
Like that's
And
insane to me. People ask
oh,
me
it's
about my
absolutely insane.
childhood. I've got like 5 memories,
Yeah, it's and
They're all
people,
flashes. Yeah, it's like an Eve 6 song. It's like words and clips and phrases.
yeah, and so people, that's trauma though. It's like we try to get rid of that, and not knowingly, subconsciously, we are trying to get rid of the past or bury it per se. But I remember him telling my mom, that I lied to him or lied about things to him and my aunt. And if he's thinking like if I took a cookie out of the cookie jar kind of a lie, no. I don't really think that's what it was. He was setting a stage to shut down any story I could possibly tell my mother. Or when I was finally visiting my dad every other weekend, what if I told my dad? My dad, I really didn't care for him. And what if I would have told my dad? So I think he was setting a stage of, and labeling me and shutting down my story. Now, have I lied? Abso-freaking-lutely, I've lied. I lied about stupid shit. I've lied about serious shit. And uh, it is what it is. God's forgiven me in the podcast. We all have lied some point in our life, but that's what stinks about sexual abuse, especially with children, is I had one casework that was like, well, how do you know that the child is telling the truth? I don't know, but I'm gonna assume
Your
so. So
default to believe in them, yeah.
yeah, I'm gonna assume a child is telling me the truth. So that's what, if you're an adult and you're looking at stuff, or you have somebody in your family that kind of raises concern, or
Right.
somebody that raises, or your own child is raising concern that they possibly are being touched by somebody, um, listen to them, because a child will tell you. I think I did say stuff, but without saying it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I would refer to other things like Uncle Kenny's mean, or that he's being this without. And I remember telling my mom that, like, I don't want to go over there. He's mean. And I do remember telling her that. And I would tell her, like, listen, I'll stay at home. I'll catch the bus on my own. I do
Right.
not, but who's going to leave a 7 or 8-year-old at home? I mean, I'm sure some people do, and that's a crime in itself. But, you know, she wouldn't leave me at home. And it was like you were trying to tell without telling, and because you were still scared of the perpetrator. So
Well,
so that's what, I mean, I think that's what I'm going to tell adults, that are listening. That's what to look for, is you have two sides of this. You have you, who was an introvert. You have me, that was an extrovert. But there were signs. There were so many signs, maybe on different levels of that you could have looked for. And
let's talk
um,
about some of those physical signs. Like Kendra and I both had chronic
bladder
bladder
infections.
as kids, and I've got 4 kids. I can't think of a single time any of them has had a bladder infection as a child, and we
Never.
had them. We had them all the time, constantly, and even like as a teenager, I would get yeast infections, and my mother would she would slut shame me over it. Basically talk about like that underwear I was wearing. Like, well, if you didn't want to wear if you don't want to wear that slutty underwear, you wouldn't be getting those infections. And I wasn't sexually active in high school. I wasn't
No, you
sleeping
weren't.
around. That came like I was kind of behind the 8 ball on that one. Yeah, I didn't do a lot of stuff till after high school because I was afraid my parents were going to beat the shit out of me, and they would have. Like,
Yeah.
it's funny, growing up in an abusive household, how strict your parents actually are because, like, no smoking, no drinking, no drugs, no sleeping around, no, couldn't watch The Simpsons, because, Bart would
Right.
tell Homer not to have a cow, man. Like I couldn't consume any media that was going to teach me to talk to my parents disrespectfully because,
And
God forbid.
I think that was part of his plan though, is to almost isolate you. Because they did shame you. And that's what all I heard growing up is couldn't you be more like Angela? Why can't you be as smart or, and I constantly had to hear this. And it was hurtful. And it was almost like, Angela and I talked about this the other day. It was almost like they used us. And I'm going to say all of them, not just, her dad, but like they would use and pin us for their own personal, like, either jealousy issues or vendetta issues. I'm going to tell the story. I don't know if Angela, I find it funny now that we're older, but every day we would get off the bus and I've always been athletic and I love my cousin dearly, but she doesn't have an athletic bone in her body. Like if we're running from a fire, I'm going to have to carry her. And,
I did make it through boot camp. Thank you very much.
I know I would, I'm not gonna lie to you. I was absolutely shocked. I didn't think you would. I was like, she's gonna call me because they're sending her home because she could run a mile.
Mm-mm.
And she did it. And I'm so proud of her for that. But I think you did it too. Also, you made it through boot camp and you were in the Navy and you did wonderful, great things to prove a point. And, and that's part of what you went through. I don't think you would have pushed yourself that hard had you not,
Needed
had
to get the hell out of Dodge.
you need to get the hell out. You had no choice but to run. So anyhow, when we get off the bus, I have to laugh because I'm picturing all this. It used to piss me off. I'm not gonna lie. It would piss me off because I did not want to get off the bus and have to run. But every time we would get off the bus, we lived in the country and my aunt, she would put Angela at a starting point and then she would put me a half a mile back and I would still beat her. And I knew I was going to beat her. And it got so to the point, like even as a child, I seen the ignorance of it. And like, is she waiting? Will this end if Angela wins? Will this, whatever, you have, and now as an adult, I can look back and say there was like maybe a jealousy issue with my mom or something. I don't know.
Like where our moms were competing with each other.
With
Like
each
we're
other,
just
yeah.
carrying out a 40-year-old vendetta.
And I'm not saying that's what happened, but I can only assume because it felt like it. So I remember one time we got off the bus and I'm like, screw it. I am going to jog. And I did start jogging and your mom was yelling at me and she's like, I know you can run. And so I would pick up the pace just enough to stay on Angela's heels, but she won that day. And I think it really ended. Like I'm sure there was other competitions that they started, but it was always a comparison. And I never understood that, you have two amazing little girls in their own rights. You have a bright young girl who was given a gifted mind. And I used to be jealous of it. I'm not jealous of it anymore. I'm flattered.
No, because I got that slow, fat ass,
Yeah, like I did sports and I was good at them. And I was really good at them. And I had a wing. I literally had to vacuum my algebra
basketball
teachers.
Star.
Yeah, I had to vacuum my algebra teacher in high school's room every day after school. So he would give me a D- to make sure I was on the court. Which,
well, God bless that man.
Yeah, but if you're a teacher and you're listening to this, please don't do that. Make sure the kid. Not that we're going to use algebra, but just make sure they're passing.
Kendra, I do math every day for fun.
Yeah, no thanks. Absolutely not. Not my thing. I'll counsel you. I will spiritually guide you. I love history. I did get an A+ in history because I loved it. I did love it. But, our parents had two amazing kids. And I think that aggravates me sometimes to this day. Cause it still happens. Like my mom will be like, I just got off the phone with Angela and blah, 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 blah. And instead of like saying, I enjoyed my conversation with your cousin Angela. It's like a comparison of some sorts. And it does. It's not. It doesn't drive me nuts anymore. And how do I say this in a nice way? I just think our moms sometimes lack. I think they're ignorant sometimes. There you go. I'm just going to be forefront. That's what this podcast is. I think they're ignorant sometimes, and um, I think that is part of maybe why I never spoke up too, because like your dad painted me as a liar. Your mom loved me, but was still I was felt like I was being used. And then my mom loved me, but I had to constantly hear on how smart you were and why couldn't I be that? Or why didn't I do this? And that hurt me as a child. And that made me say, okay, well, then why would I speak up? They're
Right.
not going to, they're not going to believe me. B, our moms have a heart, they're very good at comparing. If I gave them my trauma, they're going to tell me about somebody else's trauma and I know you've heard that too. And I won't tell the people
Yeah.
that they have used, but everybody's been through trauma. I know this, but it's hurtful when you compare other people's traumas.
Right.
So that's why I think I kept my mouth shut for so long. Like what good is it going to do?
Well, another thing that was kind of a recurring theme. Well, it wasn't for you, it was for me, but for the outsider looking in, I was chronically constipated as a kid.
Jesus.
Um,
Yes, you were.
and Kendra's shaking her head because
Mm.
like my mom turned my chronic constipation into Kendra's problem, because we were essentially raised together. So,
And I pooped
uh,
3 times a day. Okay. I
yeah,
had no
Kendra
problems.
had no problems pooping, but my mom just started just just pouring prune juice like right down the maw,
Oh,
like open it, like oh, go, like here's it, just it, for the life of me, I'm thinking, mom, like, isn't it a glaring, like a bright red flag for you that like you have to give your kid X-Lax? Like,
yeah.
I
And she
don't
didn't
know
just give
how
us
many.
prune juice. She mixed it with Kool-Aid. Every child back in that day, there was like the red packet, the green packet. They were like 15 cents for a packet. You added 2 cups of sugar and a gallon of water. Every child loved Kool-Aid. That's what we were raised on. Your mother ruined Kool-Aid for us. Because she
Oh
would mix
yeah.
the prune juice. Yeah. She would mix the prune juice with the Kool-Aid, and we couldn't leave the table, all because Angela couldn't poop. I could not leave the table unless I drank it, and I had to drink it because Angela had to drink it. So, yeah. Oh my
Well,
God.
and this sounds like a funny thing to gloss over, but I bring it up in the podcast because we talk about what should people see. That's something to
Mhm.
see. That's a data
Absolutely.
point. Like,
Yes.
and you could do your own reading. I don't want to get super specific about it, but there's a lot of reasons why um, a child might have trouble going to bathroom, and a lot of it has to do with pain. Like not wanting to go, holding it in, and to that effect, Kendra and I, we used to hold our urine,
Yeah.
like we wouldn't go pee. We were afraid to come out of our rooms and go to the bathroom. I actually, it's kind of embarrassing to admit this, but like we're just kind of doing it now, I guess. But like my bedroom in my old house, the bathroom was right by my parents' room, and if I were in bed for the night, I would not leave my bedroom to go to the bathroom. I would I would pop the cover off the vent in my room, and I would pee down the heat vent, because I didn't want to wake anybody up. And like that's that's not normal behavior. And my
Yeah.
mom my mom figured it out, that I was doing it. She obviously didn't understand why I was doing it, and freaked out. And uh, it's very upsetting that
It's
she didn't
hard. It's hard to
kind
listen
of
to it
pivot
too.
from that.
Absolutely. Well, and that's not the only thing you did, as a child. And I will never talk about embarrassing moments, without your permission. But this one we did talk about, and I liked how you analyzed it. And after I share it, I would like you to analyze it for our listeners. When we were younger, I'm talking little, and Angela would take, back in the old days, you didn't have the luxury of mustard and ketchup coming out of squeeze bottles. They were like
Right.
jars. I don't know if you remember that. So they would have these jars of mustard with the big lid, and they were big jars of mustard and yellow mustard. And Angela would disappear. She would hide behind the couch, and she would take the jar of mustard and she would eat that thing almost in its entirety. And we were talking about that the other day, because I used to think, oh my gosh, as a kid, I didn't know that, this was part of what we were going through. This was a reaction. Um, and I brought this up to Angela the other day when we were discussing podcast things to talk about. And if you could, Angela, would you let them know, what you've discovered through your journey and why that was a possibility that you did that?
That's something that both my mom and my dad have made fun of me for over the years, and it's been a source of embarrassment. Basically, a lot of these odd behaviors, my mom would get really upset, and I not because she was worried about me. I feel like some of these odd behaviors were upsetting to her because she felt like it was inviting attention to her or inviting attention to her house. And, um, not everybody knows this, but I have been diagnosed as neurodivergent as an adult. And, obviously those behaviors were around when I was a child. And it's interesting to think, there's so much overlap between the neurodivergence and the trauma, um, to know what's driving these behaviors. But where I'm going with this is back in the 80s, like we didn't tolerate neurodivergence, we didn't tolerate different. Like we were taught to mask, mask it, like and just have some sense slapped into us, like we couldn't carry on, like we couldn't cry about stuff, um, like stim and be overwhelmed, like some of our kids are now, that I deal with, like that just wasn't acceptable. So like this mustard thing is really something that was used over the years to like embarrass me. Like when my mom brings up this is what I had to deal with. Like I love it when they pose things like that. Like, oh, you don't know what a difficult child you were. Like, this is what I had to deal with. And she brings up the mustard thing. But yeah, like you and I were talking about it, and like I kind of put it in Chat GPT to see what it said. And like, so I'll just read right from the Chat GPT because this is the first time I've ever read anything to this effect or thought about it this way. And it was kind of eye opening. Um, it said, basically, you're eating that mustard because your nervous system was trying to survive, regulate, and feel safe with the tools a child actually had. None of that behavior is random or weird. Here's what was likely going on piece by piece. 1, hiding equals safety and invisibility. So, hiding behind the couch is a classic response in kids who don't feel safe being seen. If danger or boundary violations happened at night, which is when mine would happen, um, or when you were vulnerable, your body learned you're safer by making yourself smaller. And when you're out of sight, you're carrying less risk. And enclosed spaces are control. So that's not imagination. That's your nervous system choosing concealment over fight or flight because freeze or hide was the safest option available as a kid. And if you think about that, we talk about PTSD and fight or flight. There's no fighting back as a kid, so we got to freeze or
No.
fawn. But here's where it got interesting. So the second point, eating something intense like mustard, like that's serving to regulate our senses. So mustard is sharp, it's acidic, it's strong smelling, it burns your mouth. So kids who disassociate, are numb, are anxious, or are flooded will often seek extreme sensory input. This is going to help them feel something. Like, listen, let that resonate. Eating
Mm-hmm.
something sharp and strong and acidic like mustard for a kid who is numb and anxious, that helps them feel something. They have to put themselves back into their body. So like they take this strong sensory input to basically put themselves back in their body and override internal chaos with a single controllable behavior. And like, I don't want to compare that to cutting, because one is bodily harm and one's not. But when I read
Mm-hmm.
that, I kind of thought about it that way, because I do have friends, and I'm sure people too that when they're
Have done
trying
the
to
bodily harm.
regulate, like it's a control thing, and
Mm-hmm.
like they just want to feel something. And like it was weird that Chat GPT put it that way, like I would eat that mustard to feel something, and it says like, why would I choose that food specifically as my control? Well, it's something I get to choose. It's something I get to eat and hide so nobody sees what I eat. Like when you do things outwardly, there's always the risk that people are going to see those physical signs and ask questions. But when you ingest things, when you hide and you ingest, like, you're controlling what you're ingesting, you're controlling who can see you, and like basically you're controlling the amount of questions you get afterwards. It, like, when I'm 6, 7 years old, I don't know how much actual analytical or intellectual thought is going into that, but that's what I was doing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I never, it was that when you read that to me, it was eye opener, not just for you but for me as well, because I'm like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. And it like put all the dots together, connected everything, and some of your behaviors and some of my behaviors. You were about hiding, I was about I turned everything into anger. I was a very angry child, a very angry teen, and a very angry adult. Um, and I had someone ask me though, that listened to our podcast, and they're like, I would really wanted to get your view on the biblical side of things. And I'm going to end my session of this, and I know you're going to share something powerful as well. But I wanted to leave with a little biblical, dose, because we said that I was coming from the spiritual side, you were coming from the analytical side. And hold on one second, I'm going to cough. My household has been fighting this lovely super flu that has taken over our nation. And now I'm on the tail end of it. And in the tail end of it, you get this cough that can last up to 7 weeks, they say. So great.
well, I guess you
But
didn't
I'm
want a robo trip before the Zoom call either, probably.
no, no. Um, so I'm going to leave my statement, and then Angela's going to share some stuff, and um, we'll see you the next time. But so for me, the Bible, it's ambiguous about sexual abuse, especially of children. It does clarify, because people always say, you've heard Angela and I say, our parents always say, give it to God, give it to God. But the Bible clearly says it's evil, and it's not excusable, and it's not a misunderstanding. So I'm going to leave you guys with some verses. If you have gone through some of this, and you can use this through any kind of thing that you're going through. But God hates exploitation of the vulnerable. And who is vulnerable? Children. Psalms, I want to say it's 82:3. It says, defend the cause of the weak and the fatherless. So defend, for me, I took that personally. Maybe you won't, Angela, as much, because it says defend, the cause of the weak and the fatherless. But you were the weak, like me. I was also weak and fatherless. So I took that because, God's saying, Angela and I were talking the other day too, and she touched my heart a little bit. Sometimes I do have a heart. And she touched it
Aw.
by saying that she felt special because I was vulnerable with her during, certain times in my life. And I'm not a very anybody. I trust my husband at 99.9%. And I'm getting to that 100%. But people don't understand when you go through trauma how hard it is to trust. And because our trust was robbed and broken. And I had to look at my relationship with God through all of this. Do I really trust him? Do I trust him? And that's when I got these verses and I started diving into his word. Jesus' strongest warnings are for those who harm children. In Matthew 18:6, he says it would be better to have a millstone hung around their neck than abuse a child. And sin is never minimized for the sake, this is the biggest one. Sin is never minimized for the sake of religious reputation. And that's where we'll get into that conversation. That's going to be a whole podcast episode with the gaslighting that is
Spiritual
used.
gaslighting. Stay
Spiritual
tuned.
gaslighting. Yes. But scripture repeatedly exposes abuse of power, even by religious leaders. So abuse is not just sin in general. It is a violent misuse of power that God, throughout the entire Bible, explicitly, opposes. So I'm going to leave you with those verses. Psalms 82:3, Matthew 18:6. Tell you today that the only reason my mind is not broken and that I'm not sitting in a psych ward is because I finally trusted 100% God. And I'm working on people still to this day. And that's something that I think is going to take time, but I think 99.9% is pretty darn good for this gal. And Angela can probably confirm that because she's known me my entire life. I'm not a very vulnerable person.
I mean, I kind of dig that, but probably for your own edification, you like to let your hair down once in a while. But
Once in a while.
I've always appreciated. This is where I struggle because I didn't have that support at home, and I know Kendra didn't either. But I find myself then and still almost coming to her like a mother, and I cousin, I love you. I love you and I appreciate you. And I'm so sorry that
You make me
this
cry.
was given to you. Like I didn't choose to give it to you, but I'm so thankful that you took it because I love you. And I want to share with the listeners. Oh, yes, you deserve to be loved. I wanted to share with the listeners a little bit about where I stand spiritually because Kendra and I kind of joke that she's the Jesus freak and I'm the mind. And I've had some people reaching out to me to talk about it a little bit. And so I have to be on the record here and say like I am a Christ follower. I am a Christian. I was raised in the church. Um, I have a lot of my own struggles with religion that we will talk about more, but I have two younger brothers. One passed away, and after my brother passed away, it was thrown in my face all the time that God spared me. God spared me. God took my brother. And so every time I was bad, every time I wasn't meeting their expectations, every time I just didn't do well enough in school, every time I was let down to my parents somehow, they would bring it up to me. Well, God spared you, but he took your brother. Like you're squandering God's gift. And Kendra, that broke my heart, and it broke my heart for years because no child should ever have to justify their existence. No child should ever have to give a PowerPoint presentation to their parents about how they are not squandering God's gift. And so I've carried a lot of hurt around spirituality, but I do still talk to God and I cry out to God. And what I want to share with the listeners is, a prayer that I wrote, that I keep in my notes. And when I'm feeling defeated, when I'm feeling broken, when I'm feeling like I don't have air in my lungs, like I pull it out and I read it out loud, and it grounds me and it comforts me. And I wanted to share this intimate prayer with you, that you might find some grounding and some comfort in it. So it says, I have walked through fire since childhood. Yet let Shadrach in the furnace, I was not alone in the flames. I was harmed, but I was not abandoned. I was wounded, but I was not claimed by the people who hurt me. Their darkness is not my inheritance. Their choices are not my calling, and their cruelty is not my reflection. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted, and he was close to me even when no one else was. He saw what was hidden. He counted every tear, and he heard the cries that I was too scared to speak. No weapon formed against me shall prosper, and many weapons were raised against me, yet here I stand, scarred but standing, bruised but breathing, not destroyed, not erased. I call my voice back from every moment where I was silenced. I call my power back from every room where I was small.
Come on.
I call my worth back from every lie that has ever been spoken over me, and what was stolen from my childhood does not define my womanhood.
Keep
What
going.
was done to me cannot undo what God has placed in me. I am fearfully and wonderfully made, not by my parents' choices, not by my abuser's shadows, but by a God who saw my entire life and still chose to breathe purpose into me. I am a twice forged soul, tempered by trauma, refined by fire, strengthened by pain that did not kill me. Though I fall, I will rise. So my grief is a tide, it's not a prison, and my tears are a release, not a weakness. And when
Come
I
on.
do drop to my knees, I remember God's promise underneath are the
Mm.
everlasting arms. So I am still here. I am still becoming. I am still rising. And nothing that tried to break me gets the final word.
Amen.
Here we are in all of our glory, country crocked. I can't believe it's not better.